I think because Danica wasn't there at the kickoff, we had asked if Brian could serve as the chair of this meeting, and I'll let you guys kind of play dual roles there. But I think the goal is to just kind of go through both initiatives and get feedback. I do have some background information that I can share as far as historical discussions that we've had as a CAC, if that would be helpful. And so I guess I'll revert to you. Would you prefer to launch into the debrief of what we just heard right now, or would it be helpful to have the additional context at this point?
You know, I think a little bit of context is always helpful. So if we could quickly do that, and since Danica is on the call, I'll also say I'm happy to defer to Danica to run the meeting if she would like to do that. And I
appreciate that, Brian. I was late to the prior meeting, so I think I'll be a listener, and I think the context idea is good. So thank you.
Great.
Great. And Tyler, if you could allow me to share my screen. Right now it looks like I'm disabled, which is probably good quality control, but there is some information that might be helpful. Excellent. Okay.
Hey, just before we get started,
yep.
You know, compliments to Lori and Andrea for lining up essentially the top spokespeople on these issues early in this campaign. So that was really valuable information. Thank you.
Great. They're complicated issues for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. It's always a new journey with Zoom. Are you able to see my screen at this point?
We are, Lori, but it's still kind of like in the, not the presentation mode, but like as if you're working on it.
Okay, let me just try to. How's that?
Good, got it.
Perfect. Okay, so a little bit of context, and many of you have been part of these discussions over the years related to both the Gallagher Amendment and paid family leave, and so certainly chime in and give additional context as appropriate. So I'll start out as we did at the Policy Roundtable with a discussion around Gallagher. I'm not going to get into the details. I think the speakers did a very robust job of talking about the complicated nature of the Gallagher Amendment and the pressures that it's placing on the state budget. I will note that as you've seen in our policy framework and as we've discussed historically at the Chamber, we do have an existing position on the Gallagher Amendment. And that states, as you'll see at the top, the Boulder Chamber supports efforts to address the disproportionately high tax rates on commercial property due to the Gallagher Amendment. One mechanism for addressing Gallagher is to support equalization of the tax burden on businesses and residential property in any future request for additional property tax. And so I think that's important context. And when relevant, we do provide staff recommendations. In this particular situation, we do recommend based on the Chamber's historical positions and in light of the current conditions, the staff recommends supporting the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. With that, it's certainly the CAC's prerogative to further address, discuss, debate, and dispute. And so with that, I'll turn it to you, Brian, and you can facilitate that conversation.
Sure, thank you, Lori. So I would just offer one observation. I think this one in particular is, well, both Gallagher and Tabor have been issues for a long time, and they've been debated for a long time. Well, Gallagher has a very distinct impact on the business community, which I think creates a certain tension because, of course, this group also has a real interest in the well-being of our community in general. So it'll be interesting to hear comments from you all. So with that, I'd just like to open it up and I don't know what the best way is to facilitate
So
calling.
real, a
Somebody just-
suggestion, maybe Lori, if you just unshare your screen, that way at least we can see folks who might be raising their hands.
Yep. I will do that.
Awesome. Thank you. So why don't we, Gabriella?
Thanks, Brian. I thought that the position for repealing was very clear, and I wonder maybe if anyone else. I just had a difficult time really pulling out the key points about why it shouldn't be repealed. They were a little bit more. I don't know, a little just more unclear to me. So if anybody has a clear idea of why it should not be repealed, I'd appreciate hearing that side.
I mean, I can suggest a couple that have been brought forward just to raise, and I'm sure others picked up some, but I mean, one of the arguments that they make is that by adjusting this out of the current formula, that then the concern is over time, and this is more of appeal, I think, to residential property owners, that the residential property tax or rate that they pay will go up over time, and that's something that they're suggesting would be a concern of this. He also made the suggestion, and it's something I've never thought about, but I guess it's definitely a consideration, and that is that if you separate out the formula that has been in the Constitution, that potentially commercial property tax or property owners would be targeted for separate tax increases from residential, and that would become a potential sort of residential or residents' attack on commercial property and allow it to rise. So those are two that I pick up out of this out of their argument against that position. But I'm sure there were a number of others, but those were the two that I thought were most resonant.
I think Kim had a hand raised, and then Jonathan made a comment in the chat as well.
So this might not, thanks, Andrea, this might not have been articulated, but some of what I've heard elsewhere is that this will be positioned, if not actually to be positioned as a tax increase without a vote on actual taxes. But a question, and I wish I had put it in the chat at the time, is what does this do to state general fund revenues? My guess, my hope, is that it frees up, that there'll be more local money going to K-12. Less has to come out of the state general fund. It frees up money, not necessarily that it gets to go to higher ed, but it might, or other needs that are being unaddressed because 50% of our general fund is going to K-12 and increasingly less money from the local governments. So if anybody has thought on that.
I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, the idea is that, if you have, in particular, rural districts where this could really slam them, they're going to have some sort of a state response to address the underfunding of education, let alone some of the other major institutions like fire safety, that kind of thing, that are funded by the residential property tax. In those communities, that means that there's more resources, theoretically, for the state to apportion to other needs.
Jonathan,
Anybody?
did you want to make your comment that you had raised in the chat?
Sure. I was just really basically struck by that the nature of the concerns were pretty much speculative, right? You can make the case, oh, this is a lack of a tax decrease, and therefore we'll call it an increase. But the other concerns were, well, what will lawmakers do? What will taxpayers do? It's a pretty not compelling case for, oh, something really bad will happen. I think we do have a pretty good idea of some of the bad things that will happen if revenues are cut by the amount that we have here. I think we could have probably talked more about special tax districts and what some of the impacts were there. I think we talked about that at a previous meeting, things like fire districts and that. I'm happy to hear that staff is advising that we support this, and I'll be recommending we do the same.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Judy. Thank you for waving it back and forth aggressively.
Yeah, that's just my nature. So I just want to add the comment that these rural school districts are already really in dire straits. And 60% of Colorado's school districts are on 4-day weeks. And they're on 4-day weeks because they can't afford to be on 5-day weeks. And it isn't a partisan issue for these, you know, in Walden, in Grand County, everywhere, Clear Creek. They want Gallagher repealed.
That's great information. Thank you. And Peter, as a property owner, commercial property, I wonder what your take is on this.
A lot of our tenants, I mean, I'm sort of the messenger when tax time comes around, when I send out the bill, and it's tough. I mean, sometimes the property taxes have gone up the last few years, 20, 30, maybe 50%. So this change would help them a lot. I mean, to me, it's going to be hard for voters to decide to tax themselves more and tax businesses less. That's always sort of a challenge. But I think, like, these guys presented a great argument. And if you see the bigger picture on what they're talking about, it's compelling, and I think it makes a lot of sense.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Adrian.
I'm just curious, this may be a dumb question, but does this thing have a chance of passing, given?
You know, I'll weigh in on that, Adrian. The polling doesn't look promising.
Yeah.
I think your comment is well taken, and yet it's still an important discussion.
That wasn't a comment. That was a facetious question.
It was a question. It wasn't facetious. It was a naive question. Is there a chance in hell? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's got a tough road to go, because the opposition is, I think Jonathan outlined it well, which is they're going to raise your residential property taxes. And while that's not accurate, it's a lot of, as Jonathan said, speculative. It does leave that impression, and it tends to be an easier statement.
Well, and that's a position that, I mean, every year that these things happen, you know, presumably it adds momentum to the next cycle that comes around where this might be considered. I thought actually this year that had a better chance than normal, just because there's been a lot of shifting in the way people are thinking about things. And particularly Tabor, you know, in my amateurish estimation, Tabor's getting a lot of attention, and Gallagher does tie into Tabor in that really challenging way. So it seems addressing Gallagher is easier than addressing Tabor.
Yeah, Brian, I would agree. I mean, I would think in the context of businesses struggling, I think this is a great year to try and pass something like this. But once again, yeah, it's going to be very difficult. You're kind of swimming upstream with trying to get people to tax themselves more. It's tough, but it really is the right thing to do. And in this year, I don't know if it'll pass this year and they'll come back with a newer version, you know, in a couple of years if it doesn't make it. But it's something that definitely needs to be addressed, because it's really tough on most of our businesses are 5 people or less, and for them to have those kind of increases every year is very, very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific. I certainly don't want to curtail the discussion, and so let it continue. But at some point, I actually think it would be helpful to call for a vote, Brian. And so you know, when the conversation is at a place when you think it might be helpful, from a process standpoint, there are times when it's helpful for us to get more of a quantitative take on the CAC's thoughts, and we will take that information to our board of directors. And so when appropriate, Andrea can kind of walk us through the mechanics of the voting.
Thank you, Lori. And just so I'm clear, is this a straw poll or a formal motion and vote?
Yeah, this is you know, I would call it a straw poll. The board of directors determines the policy and positions for the chamber, but it is helpful to get feedback from the CAC. We're recording this session as we did with the Policy Roundtable itself, and we'll use those comments with the board. Obviously, we have a number of board members who sit on the CAC as well, and they can help share the feedback too.
Okay, great, thank you. So with that, are there any other comments or questions anybody wants to throw out before we do take a vote? Yeah, then I think let's go ahead and take one, because I feel like the Family Paid Medical Leave Act is probably something we may feel we all have a little more control over and perhaps more feedback on. Okay, so Andrea?
Yeah, the way that it'll be asked is we're going to put up a poll in just a moment, and it'll ask you a question. You'll have two choices. It'll ask you if you're for the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment or against. And Tyler is going to make that live. Tyler, are you ready?
Yep. Here we go.
Can I hit the same button more than once?
Exactly.
That
Wait, Brian just voted for me.
trajectory.
Wait a minute.
Is there any benefit to
Everybody
being
receive
chair?
I'm going to do it on paid family leave if you do it now.
Very good.
Okay, and then Andrea, will Tyler tell us when all the votes have come in?
It looks like we're waiting for 5 more votes.
Great, thanks, Tyler.
Um,
We might have, Tyler, does that include anybody on the phone?
it doesn't look like we have any phone-in callers,
Okay,
but we do have a couple that may just be logged in and not active on the computer. So we're at 19.
Yeah, we have somebody identified as Tess that we've tried to reach out to try to understand who that is, and we're not sure.
So Anne is back and was asking about the vote. Andrea?
Yeah, and we have a vote occurring right now if you're for the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment or against the repeal, and we put the poll out to each of the participants if you're for the repeal or against.
Tyler, just a reminder that some staff won't be voting, so your counts may be a little off because of that.
Gotcha. Well, then I think we're probably about there then, because it would just be the 4 of us that are left. So good. I'll go ahead and end that poll.
great, thank you.
And I'll share the results.
Oh, look at that. We don't see those numbers very often on just about anything. So thank you. It's helpful to get a gauge of where folks are. To Adrian's point, we don't know what's going to happen at the statewide level and the trajectory of the discussion. It's complicated, in particular, but it's helpful information that we will share with our board as we're having this discussion. John, anything else you wanted to add?
I only add, Nikhil asked, just do the board directors who sit on the CAC vote? And yeah, they do. Definitely considered to be a part of the team. So, and Nikhil saying, just send it to me. He's for it. So there you go. So we're going to add that to the list. And I know that Ann weighed in, I noticed, in favor too. So 2 more folks who didn't click on the poll side but are in favor. So we'll just record that.
Great. So we'll get, Tyler, if you could just add those to the final tally. We will share that information with our board of directors. Brian, anything else that you wanted to address on Gallagher before we move on to paid medical and family leave?
No, I would only suggest it looked like about 2 people voted against it. Maybe they can find each other and commiserate on how stupid the rest of us are.
Great idea. Let's be honest, they'll probably be the ones high-fiving in November when this thing doesn't do anything.
Drinks on them. Okay.
There we go. Well, I will go back to the slideshow then, if that's okay. And let's see, I need to share my screen. And okay, can you see my screen at this point? Yes, excellent. Okay. So paid medical and family leave initiative 283. Again, I'm not going to go over the overall discussion because we just had a lengthy conversation from our speakers. I will recap what this organization, the CAC, has discussed over time to bring folks who are newer up to speed and to reflect on kind of the trajectory of the discussions over the years, quite frankly. So in 2019, the Boulder Chamber did have a position that was supportive of programs that provided our workforce with family leave. They helped to improve retention morale and provide employees with flexibility to care for family with serious health conditions. As our state considers aspects of a family leave program, it's critically important that legislators assure specificity regarding program scope and its financial components, details regarding implementation process and adequate timing for the development and implementation, transparency in the regulatory development process, alignment with FMLA and other programs, ensuring enforceable fraudulent claims protection, flexibility that allows organizations to develop family leave programs that address their specific workforce's compensation and benefit needs, and validation that premium payments will cover the cost. Back in February of this year, and it seems astonishing to me that there was a February 2020 because the last 5 months seem to have just slipped by, but we did talk about this again in February, and this was just to reflect back. Deborah and various members of her team, as well as members who are opposing, various family leave initiatives, have spoken to the chamber a couple of different times and did so in December as part of a broader Northwest Chamber Alliance discussion. And so based on that, as well as discussions at the beginning of the year, the feedback from the CAC in February was, again, that the Boulder Chamber is supportive of programs that provide our workforce with family leave, elements for consideration to exempt small businesses given limited staffing capacity, don't mandate a public sector insurance pool, phase the amount of qualifying leave time over a multi-year period, and then maintaining qualifications for paid leave that are conservatively applied to close family members and other significant health-related incidents or existing government mandates. So from there, and apologies for the crowded slide here, I also wanted to note that in this past legislative session, Senator Steve Fenberg had a bill that passed that did address sick leave for employees. And so the components of that all employers are required to provide employees with paid sick leave for COVID issues, and this was certainly a COVID-oriented bill. It requires employers to provide paid sick leave to their employees, and accrued at 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. An employee begins accruing paid sick leave when the employee's employment begins. And they can use paid sick leave for when employees have mental or physical illness, injury, or health condition, need medical diagnosis. There's kind of a host of different criteria. Caring for a family member who has, or themselves, if there's been domestic abuse, sexual assault, harassment, and there needs to be an absence from work. If, in the case of COVID, public officials have ordered the closure of school or childcare or the employee's place of business due to a health emergency. And then in addition to the paid sick leave accrued, requires employers to provide additional paid sick leave during a public health emergency based on the number of hours employees work. And then finally prohibits employers from retaliating against employees who use paid sick leave. So we don't have a staff recommendation for this. We feel like it's a fairly complicated issue, and there's been a lot of moving parts. We don't have an existing position other than those that I just shared with you that speak to this specifically. And so I guess with that, unless John or Andrea, you have additional context you want to provide, I would turn it back to you, Brian.
Yeah, let me just offer that this doesn't mean that we won't ultimately have a recommendation to our board. It really speaks to the importance of this conversation. We want to hear the input from the CAC members. What we've said to the chairs is, listen, if there seems like there's an occasion that this group wants to take a position on it, great. We're not necessarily looking for a vote. This could be a challenging division amongst the CAC, but your input and thoughts on this are super important for us as we as staff think about any recommendation we would potentially make to the board. So just wanted to offer that additional sort of process thinking.
Thanks, John. All right, who wants to start off with their thoughts? Danica, was that a wave? That was a mosquito, okay. All right, I'll start off with one kind of question. So Lori, all those things, this has been discussed before and you went through quite a few things. Do you have a sense of whether any of those kinds of recommendations or directions we had discussed before are actually incorporated in this bill?
I think there are elements, certainly. So over time, there's certainly been various issues. I mean, I think the concern about people being able to go on maternity leave and that kind of thing is a constant theme. I think we are seeing various legislation that is addressing different elements of that. And so we're in a different place today than we were, 18, 24 months ago. And quite frankly, this has been a discussion at the state legislature for 5 or 6 years now, Judy. So it's not a new conversation, but it's not a new conversation with the CAC either, except that each time there's nuance to it, there's more specificity, different things are addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just hit a couple just so if you look at the list of things that we've addressed, overall, listen, this has been I'm not going to say contentious. We're never contentious on CAC, but this has been a area division, and yet we all say this is an issue we want to address. So this is a proposal for addressing it. That said, there are a couple of specific elements that are in this proposal that when we issued further or our opinion in the past, we've said we're concerned about. So one was the sort of narrowness of the definition of family. That was something that is an element to this that I think is in the current proposal is a little broader, as was argued. And then second, the notion that small business was exempted. On a positive side, you see that that's what's in this this proposed initiative. So small businesses of 10 or less are not required to pay for their employees. And then a final point, I think, of consideration is one of the challenges to previous legislation in this area was the notion of a pool government instituted program that would get support from this funding, and that there would be a government program that would run the program. And that's what essentially they've created. There's in the past there's been concern about the actuarial soundness of that, but that's something that we had been concerned about, I think more from an aspect of solvency and versus administrative issues. I think that wasn't as big a concern. So those are elements pro and on, I think, in this proposal, but just to get more specific about answering your question there.
Great, thanks. So we've got Kim, Judy, and then Bob. Let's go to you.
Thanks. I'm troubled that local governments are exempt, but nonprofits are not. That was why I asked, isn't a local government very often the largest employer in a community? And I'm also troubled, unless I missed it, that if you have on your existing offering the FMLA, so for example, CU is a huge employer, a major employer in the community, but we have very good coverage through FMLA for our employees. And I don't understand why we would have to duplicate it. I also don't understand why the local government would be exempt and sort of leave their employees high and dry unless they have something that they're offering. It just seems uneven, unbalanced, and creates a bureaucracy that looks like it could just grow and grow and increase the costs exponentially without any controls. It just seems unreasonable to me.
Thank you, Kim. Judy?
So just to add a little bit to the history, the 2019 bill had the public insurance model. The thing that really changed between 2019 and 2020 was shift to a private insurance model. And part of the reason Good Business Colorado objected to that was it was a mandate to provide the 12 weeks of leave with no assurance that this private insurance model was going to spring up out of nowhere, no understanding of what the costs would be to get this insurance. And so it left small businesses with a mandate that was completely no way to pay for it. So that was the biggest shift in 2019, I think, between 2019 and 2020. And so the whole coalition dropped out on this private model because business didn't like it. And also the social safety net, people who wanted to provide people with leave, they didn't like it either. So now we're back to this public insurance model. I will say, Kim, to your question, my understanding of this ballot measure is that if your business is already providing this level of family leave, then you are exempt from this thing. So any business that's already providing 12 weeks of paid family leave will continue to do that. And also there's a provision if you want to do it on your own, buy private insurance to fund 12 weeks of family leave. If you want to now start offering that benefit, you can do that and be exempted from this. I do think that there are quite a few local governments that are providing a benefit. I don't know what the number is though, which is why I asked the question, but I know that there are some, and I know Boulder County does a good job. And I think Denver County also does a pretty good job. So that doesn't get at small rural communities, the little towns in those places that aren't providing that kind of benefit and would be exempt. And I agree with you. I think it's too bad we didn't include them. Obviously, I am a big supporter of this measure. And I will say I no longer have a business. And so I'm not in the middle of COVID staring down having to spend a little bit more money. But I will say that if we had passed this bill when it was first introduced in 2015, everybody's employees, when COVID hit, would have had 12 weeks of leave that the employer wouldn't have had to fund, so that they could stay home if they got sick or if they got infected or, you know, tested positive. They would have been able to use that, and the fund would have been built up over time, and we would be in such a better place than we're in right now. And so somebody asked the presenter, well, this isn't a good time, but what is a good time? We have been looking at this bill for 5 years, and as a group, we've always thought it isn't the right time. And so you do have to ask, if not now, then when? Because we are the only country in the world that doesn't offer people some kind of paid family leave. And I think the COVID thing has really pointed out that the essential workers are the people at the low end of the pay scale. Those are the people we're all relying on. And they're the ones that are desperate for a benefit like this. So that's my soapbox.
Well done, Judy. Thank you. Bob?
I'm just kind of building on where Judy was. For me, there are two main issues that we're thinking about here, but the main one is equity, a gender equity issue. I think it's just as Judy said, we're really the only major nation, any developed nation, that this isn't just automatic. And it feels to me like it's a long overdue kind of equalizer that women shouldn't be knocked out or have to come back after 2 weeks because they can't afford to spend 12 weeks with their newborn. I also wear a small business hat, and I would love to be able to, for the amount that it would cost me for my employees to be able to provide this benefit. I think, you know, Kim, I realize CU is slightly bigger than my business, and so just a tiny bit difference there. But we really, I haven't looked lately, but insurance for a small business would be a lot of money, whereas spreading the pool out over the whole state the way this would make it much more affordable for small businesses. I'm a little worried. John, actually, do you know, how are they defining small businesses at below 50 that they're saying are exempt? Or
it's 10 or fewer.
Yeah, it's 10.
But everybody's still covered. It's just that the employer doesn't have to pay into it. The employee still pays in, they're still covered. They still get the benefit.
Okay.
Every employee.
All right, so that's good. Because for me, that's really what it's about, is giving everybody that coverage. And for small businesses, being able to do the right thing when one of your employees wants to go on maternity leave.
Thank you, Bob. Mark, I was curious, how do you think something like this affects your business? Good, bad?
You know, I think it was last year I was talking about this, and I'm in favor of it being a safety net approach and not private business. It just makes sense to do it at the state level and not at the employer level, for sure. That's one of my big peeves, is just piling it on the employer. I don't want to be an expert in paid family leave. You know, concerns are that the working the system is alive and well, as we have seen with the recent unemployment stuff going on, and how this overlaps with the PTO and how the employer fits into that. I do think it's a small price to pay for a really great benefit. So I agree with it in principle. I really do. That how it overlaps with the PTO, I guess, is a big thing in it, and what the protections against abuse are, you know, and the only way to do it is through a state entity, and it's inherently a leaky bucket, and we just have to get used to that. It's not going to be a super efficient approach, but it gets the job done.
Great, thank you. Ann Cooper, are you there? And if you are there and can hear me, I'd love to get your feedback on this as well. If you're not there, then clearly I'm really just talking to myself. So that won't be new though. I'm quite used to that. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Danica, you have any thoughts?
Sure. You know, I'm a small business owner, and I think I don't really know. I think don't understand the implications, but I do know that I've watched many friends leave their careers because of this issue. And so I fundamentally agree with Judy that something needs to be done, because coupled with the how expensive it is to live here, I have watched probably half of my friends not go back to work or not be able to go back the way they needed to because they didn't have the time they needed off, or they just couldn't work it out. And so it's a career staller, it's a game changer, it's an equity issue, like Bob said. I personally didn't have any leave at all, or I had I could take the 8 weeks off, but my employer didn't pay anything. It was very, very difficult for me. It has lasting impacts on the family, on the children. And so I'm a big proponent of this, and, it may not be perfect, but we have to do something. And I think that, it's, as a woman who had children, right when your career is taking off, it is so difficult to manage this. And I don't think people understand it unless you've been through it. And so I'm speaking from the heart on this. I think it's really important that we do something.
Yeah.
This is Julie Van Damen. My camera's not working, so I don't know if my audio is working, but give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Being from a nonprofit, you also often hear, well, you can exempt the nonprofits, it's too expensive for them. And, but actually, let me give you another point of view. I mean, we have a large part of our personnel are women case managers of kind of reproductive age. And so we deal with this on an ongoing basis and self-insure through some kind of extended illness benefit we give. We don't come under FMLA for our size. We're less than 50. So actually, we have found a way of covering for each other in very small departments. So it's too hard for businesses to accommodate absences. I have 2 employees out right now on maternity leave. And we make it work at 35 employees. And I would prefer this to having to deal with this from an individual nonprofit status in terms of a patch of self-insurance, a bit of ability. It would make it a lot cleaner if we had a state-run program that we could pay into that would actually do the administration of it, which includes things like evaluating medical claims. Does it qualify for? There are a lot of things that, particularly in a small organization, are onerous to have to screen yourself. I'd prefer this to what we have right now, and we offer good benefits. So.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in? Tim, got any thoughts? You don't have a thought? No. Okay.
We wanted a chair, not a comedian, Brian.
Well, you got a chair.
I appreciate the nudge, Brian, that I'm enjoying listening, and I think there's a good dialogue that is adding a lot to my thoughts. So thank you for the opportunity, but I'll nod back to the MC of the hour.
All right, thank you.
Looks like another comment from Judy.
Oh.
I would like us to take a vote on this.
Yeah.
Well, Judy, it says if you were reading our minds. So if that is the will of the chairs, then we do have a poll ready, and we can activate that when appropriate. Brian.
I'm definitely ready to go there. I just wanted to make a comment myself. It seems to me that there are so many details that maybe I'm just unaware of, right? Like, I don't know where the 1% came from. How was that number arrived at? And there's, of course, the administrative and all that, but everybody here is in business, and we know how nothing gets started by hoping you have the perfect model and then you finally execute it. It's always going to be messy in the beginning. And it certainly seems like everybody is in favor of honoring the humanity of our staff and employees by being able to offer this kind of benefit. So that's my only comment. So I think we'll put it to vote.
Great.
So we have a poll ready. Tyler's going to put the poll out to the group, and it's just simply stated yes on Amendment 283, which is for the paid family and medical leave amendment, or no on 283 if you're against this form as it is structured today. So Tyler, go ahead and launch that poll.
While you're tallying votes, can I say something? I just want to say there were some very compelling arguments, and I want to remind folks that John has given me leave to vote my own personal conscience, not always for CU. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
And it will not be ever revealed outside of this forum.
So I think we have 19 total right now. I cannot see the vote because of my login. So as soon as we collect 19 votes, I think that's it. Tyler, are we there yet?
Yep, we're there. I'm ready to share them if you're okay with that.
Yep. What's the result?
Great. So we will share this feedback with our board of directors, and actually I will share my screen yet again just to help with the process. I always have to ask, can you see my screen at this point?
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
great. So I'm just going to walk through kind of some key dates here. It is related to the process.
I lost your screen here.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let's do this.
Hey, Lori, while you're doing that, I just want to offer that I really like this way of voting in a anonymous format. I feel like it's really fair. I know we've struggled with like people feeling uncomfortable sharing their opinions or where they're going to land. So this seems to be working really well. Maybe someday when we get back together, we can figure out how to do this. But I know that that's something in the past we've struggled with, is people feeling comfortable to vote their, anonymously. So thank you.
I'll just offer the opposite, that I actually like to see how people vote, because I think, frankly, people always assume I'm a no, and I may not be.
Well, then speak up if you want to hear what your thoughts are. But I do know that people have expressed they don't feel comfortable sometimes or feel maybe intimidated that it'll have a repercussion. So I just.
Yeah. And Adrian, I think of you as a positive person, so I don't know where you get that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that.
And not bashful.
How you voted.
Not bashful. Yeah.
All right. So I think, there are pros and cons. Let's be honest, there are pros and cons to COVID and always being on Zoom. None of us wishes this for eternity, but it's what we've got right now. So with that, I will try yet again. Can you, let's see. Actually, I'm just going to read through it. I'm having some technical difficulties, which is kind of the bane of my existence. But anyway, this isn't that complicated. We will take the feedback from the CAC and share it with our board of directors. A number of folks during the meeting today are part of our board, including Bonnie Sandoval, Bob Morehouse, and others. And so they will be our ambassadors as we channel this information. And like I said, both the Policy Roundtable itself as well as the CAC meeting were recorded in case there are specific elements that we want to share. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, and I didn't mean to bring it to the party too late, but for undocumented immigrants and that, how does this act apply? Do they still qualify? Because they don't get unemployment.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark, and I don't know the answer to that. Judy, do you?
I don't know the answer. I would say if they're working for you and they're paying, you know, you're running them through your payroll system, then I don't know how you're doing that if they're undocumented.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that if they're undocumented, then you're operating illegally to have them as employees, so that this would not cover them. But
well, let's talk about undocumented.
Yeah,
they get documents tomorrow, the most efficient government entity ever.
Yeah, but I'm assuming with Judy that if you're employee that's, you know, green card or something like that, you would be covered. Yeah, I'm assuming that too.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Just to further build out the process itself. So the board of director will vote if they want to take positions at the end of the month, and then staff will update the CAC based on the board of directors decisions. And as appropriate, we'll also communicate that to the broader Boulder Chamber audience. Any questions? I do have just a couple more comments as far as what's coming up. But any other comments around Gallagher Amendment or paid medical and family leave before I get to the rest of it? Okay, so I do want to call out that our thought was to have a similar cadence with the Policy Roundtable that includes broader chamber membership and even partner organizations. Downtown Boulder Partnership members were offered the opportunity to join us, as well as our Northwest Chamber Alliance colleagues. And so there are various organizations that don't necessarily have the bandwidth to host these types of discussions. And, you know, hopefully it doesn't take away from your experience, but I think in the spirit of educating our voting public, we do like the idea of sharing that information. And so to that end, our thought is to have a similar cadence in September with local ballot initiatives. And so a policy roundtable at the top, followed by a CAC only debrief. And, you know, that's kind of the thought, but if there are concerns or feedback around that, I'd certainly welcome comments.
I have a thought.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's great. And I think the best part about it really is that we have sufficient time to debrief amongst ourselves. And tonight we did. And most times I feel like that's cut short. So I think you did that really well.
Thank you, Adrienne. We do want to protect the time where we have dialogue and engagement from the CAC. And so I'm pretty deliberate about, you know, capping times, you know, and wrapping up right at 4:30 so that we could pivot over and have a full hour for debrief for this group as well. Thank you.
Hey, Lori, it's probably a good time for me to mention something that breaking news for Lori too, but we had our meeting with the board officers and talked about, so the chamber board officers, Bonnie Sandoval and Ted Rockwell, our chair, and decided that we want to move forward relatively quickly on the municipalization agreement ballot initiative. So if that gets put on the ballot by city council, we will likely have a special meeting for a presentation of policy roundtable discussion. And then ultimately, this is a heads up for those who are on the board, a special board meeting to discuss that issue. The sense being that we are getting a lot of pressure from both sides of this issue to take a position and to be clear on where the Boulder Chamber stands. So just a heads up that from a scheduling purpose, that will likely be an off-cycle discussion and presentation. So just want to be clear on that.
And we'll be sure to reach out to this group specifically. Like John said, it'll probably occur before September 10th. And so, we'll watch out for that, and we'll certainly reach out to let you know. Okay, well, with that, it is 5:29, and I am nothing if not focused on punctuality. And so, Brian, Danica, anything else that you want from us before we wrap up this afternoon?
I just have a quick question. Is Cliff Harold staying on, or is he retired, or what happened with his position, or is he still with the chamber?
Cliff turned his back on the Boulder Chamber, the economy. No, no. Cliff,
well, I know he was leaving, but I thought he was staying, so I didn't know.
No. He was planning on leaving. I think he said March or April, and we coaxed him into staying on through June, and then he's now since moved on, or I think it was the end of July. Actually, it was just the end of this month. Or last month, and so we're in the process. Just as a heads up to all of you, we've been going through a recruitment process for the BEC executive director position. We had a panel of folks involved in the initial vetting. We're now down to a couple of candidates, and we'll be hopefully getting to a point of making a decision sometime this month. So just stay tuned. But we have some great candidates, and as I said, Cliff left an amazing legacy. So it's we're not replacing Cliff; we're building on his work. So that's the current status of that. Thanks for asking, Danica.
You already miss him.
Yeah, no, believe me, can't replace him.
Any other additional comments or questions? Brian, Danica, anything else that you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add real quick that this is an incredibly educated and informed group, and it's always a pleasure to hear what your thoughts are on these, because they actually, I learn a lot. So it's just selfish for me. So thank you.
Cool.
Wonderful. Well, thanks to everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay safe.
Yeah, thanks you guys really very much.